The stars looked different from Haven Station. Captain James Reed knew they were the same stars he'd grown up watching from Earth, but out here, at humanity's farthest outpost, they seemed colder, more distant, like they were watching him back with the same emptiness he felt inside. "Captain, your heart rate is elevated again." Ada's voice came through his personal communicator, calm and clear as always. "Would you like me to adjust the viewport tint?" James didn't answer immediately. The station's AI had been monitoring his vital signs more frequently lately. He knew why. 3 months had passed since the battle that destroyed his ship and killed his crew. 3 months of nightmares that left him sweating in the artificial gravity of his quarters. "I'm fine, Ada," he said, touching the cold glass of the viewport. His reflection stared back at him, a ghost in a standard-issue uniform. The silver stripes on his shoulder caught the dim light, mocking him. What kind of captain survived when his crew didn't? Medical records indicate that saying "I'm fine" correlates with not being fine in 73.4% of human interactions. Ada replied. A small holographic display appeared beside him, showing his vital signs in soft blue light. "Your stress indicator's suggest." "Enough." James cut her off, harder than he meant to. "Just monitor the long-range scanners. That's your job." Ada fell silent, but the holographic display lingered for a moment before fading away. James knew the AI was still watching, still learning. That's what they did. Ada had been assigned to Haven Station 5 years ago, part of the initiative to have AI assists at all human outposts. She'd learned to read human emotions, to understand their patterns. Sometimes James wondered if she understood them better than he did. The quiet of the observation deck was broken by the soft hiss of the automatic doors. Footsteps approached. Lieutenant Tom Baker, one of the few crew members who still tried to talk to him. "Sir," Baker said, keeping his distance. "The night shift is starting. You've been here for 6 hours." James nodded but didn't turn around. "Any updates from command?" "No, sir. Still radio silence about the Bright. No attacks reported in the last 2 weeks." The Bright. James's hand tightened into a fist. The crystalline aliens had appeared 3 years ago, their ships looking like shards of glass drifting through space. Beautiful, until they started attacking. His ship, the EDF Horizon, had been responding to what they thought was a simple distress call when... "Captain." Ada's voice cut through his thoughts, urgent this time. "Long-range scanners have detected an anomaly. Unknown vessel, approaching on Vector 2 to 74. James turned from the viewport, his training taking over. "Show me." A large hologram filled the center of the observation deck. The unknown ship tumbled through space, its hull reflecting starlight in strange patterns. It wasn't bright. Their ships were all sharp angles and crystal. This was something else. "Life signs?" James asked, stepping closer to the hologram. "Mixed readings," Ada reported. "The ship's systems are heavily damaged. But I'm detecting both human. And, sir, there are bright energy signatures aboard." Baker stepped back involuntarily. A captured human vessel. James studied the hologram, his mind racing. Protocol said to report it to command first. Wait for orders. Play it safe. But he saw the way the ship was tumbling. Saw the damage to its life support systems. Whoever was on that ship, human or bright, they had hours at most. "How long until it's in range?" he asked. 43 minutes at current speed," Ava answered. "Captain, I should note that your heart rate has..." "Not now, Ada." James straightened his uniform. "Baker, alert medical. Get a rescue team ready. Full quarantine protocols." "Sir." Baker looked uncertain. "What about command?" James watched the hologram, remembering the last time he'd responded to a distress call. Remembering the crystal ships appearing out of nowhere. Remembering the screams of his crew. "By the time we get approval, they'll be dead," he said finally. "And I'm not letting anyone else die on my watch. Not even them." The hologram cast blue shadows across the observation deck as James moved toward the door. his steps purposeful for the first time in months. Behind him, Ada's sensors tracked his vital signs, noting the change in his patterns, learning, always learning. She recorded the exact moment his heart rate steadied, wondering if humans knew that sometimes the best way to heal a broken thing was to give it something to save. The rescue shuttle hummed as it approached the damaged vessel. James sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls despite the tension in his shoulders. 2 medics and a security officer waited in the back, their breathing loud in their sealed suits. "Ada, status update," James said, keeping his eyes on the tumbling ship ahead. "Hull integrity at 23%. The AI responded through their comm systems. Oxygen levels critical. I'm detecting 4 life signs. 2 human, 2 bright, all showing signs of severe distress." James clenched his jaw. 2 of them. 2 of the crystalline beings that had torn his crew apart. He could turn around now, tell command it was too dangerous. No one would blame him. "Captain," Ada's voice was softer now, "your heart rate suggests." "Not now," he cut her off, guiding the shuttle closer. "Baker, prep the magnetic locks. We're going in." The damaged ship grew larger in their viewport. Up close, James could see why Ada's scans had been confused at first. It wasn't a military vessel. It looked like a research ship, its hull marked with scientific insignias rather than weapons arrays. Broken equipment floated around it like metallic confetti. "Magnetic locks engaged," Baker reported from his station. "We have a seal." James stood, checking his suit's seals one last time. "Remember the protocol. Stun anything that moves. The bright are twice as strong as they look." The airlock cycled, and they entered the ship in formation. Emergency lights cast red shadows through the corridors, reflecting off floating debris. The artificial gravity was dead, making every movement a careful calculation. They found the first survivor in what looked like a lab, a human woman in a researcher's uniform, unconscious but alive. The medics quickly secured her to a stretcher. "Life signs are stable," one medic reported. "Minor injuries, mainly from..." A crystalline sound, like wind chimes in a storm, echoed through the ship. James spun, his stun weapon raised. At the end of the corridor, a figure floated in the low gravity. Its crystalline body caught the emergency lights, sending fractals of red across the walls. But this bright was different from the warriors James had fought. Smaller, with patterns that seemed almost delicate. It made that sound again, and James realized it was trying to speak. "Don't shoot." The second human survivor appeared behind the bright, pushing off a wall to float between them. He was young, wearing the same researcher uniform as the woman. "They're not warriors. They're scientists, like us." James kept his weapon raised. "Step aside." "Please," the researcher said, raising his hands. "Their name is Singer. They'd been trying to warn us about." The ship groaned, metal shrieking against metal. Ada's voice crackled through their comms. "Captain, the hull breach is spreading. You have 4 minutes before total structural failure." The bright Singer moved forward suddenly, its crystalline form shifting in ways James had never seen before. His finger tightened on the trigger, but instead of attacking, it reached out and touched the wall. Where its crystals met the metal, patterns of light spread like frost on a window. The groaning of the hull stopped. "It's holding the ship together," the researcher said urgently. "They've been keeping us alive for the past 2 days. Please, we have to take them with us." James looked at the bright, at the way its crystals pulsed with effort. He saw no weapons, no signs of the savage geometry that had torn through his ship's hull 3 months ago. Just a being trying to save lives. The second bright appeared then, its crystalline form darker, more angular. It moved with obvious pain, helping Singer maintain the field holding the ship together. 1 minute until structural failure, Ada reported. James made his decision. "Baker, help the medics with the human survivors. I'll handle our guests." He lowered his weapon slowly. "Can they move on their own?" The researcher nodded. They'll follow me. As they retreated to the shuttle, James watched the two bright carefully. Something about their movements, their interactions, reminded him of his old crew. The way they worked together, protecting each other. He pushed the thought away. They were nothing alike. They couldn't be. But as the shuttle detached from the dying ship, James couldn't help noticing how Singer kept supporting the injured one, even though the effort made its own crystals dim with exhaustion. It wouldn't let go. 3 days after the rescue, Ada watched James through Haven Station's security cameras. He stood in the observation room connected to the medical bay, staring through the reinforced glass at the two bright beings. His hands were clasped behind his back, but his fingers kept twitching, a sign of stress Ada had learned to recognize. Their crystalline patterns are fascinating, Ada said, projecting a small hologram beside him. The one called Singer shows structures I've never seen in other bright specimens. James didn't respond, but his heart rate increased slightly. On the other side of the glass, Singer moved in that strange, flowing way of theirs. Their crystals caught the light, sending rainbow patterns across the walls. The other bright, who the researchers called Shadow, lay still on a modified bed, their darker crystals pulsing weakly. The human survivors are recovering well, Ada continued. Dr. Miller and Dr. West, they've been asking to speak with you. Let them wait, James muttered. He pressed a hand against the glass. What are they doing? Singer had moved closer to Shadow, their crystals beginning to resonate with a soft musical hum. Where their forms touched, light danced between them like neural pathways in a human brain. If I didn't know better, Ada said, I'd say they were communicating. But it's unlike any bright communication we've recorded before. She paused, processing new data. Captain, your neural patterns are showing increased activity in areas associated with memory recall. James flinched. In his mind, he saw crystal ships appearing out of nowhere, their sharp edges glowing with deadly purpose. Heard the screams of his crew as, Stop, he growled. Stop monitoring me. I can't, Ada said simply. It's my primary function to ensure the well-being of Haven Station's crew. And you are still crew, Captain. Before James could respond, Singer suddenly turned toward the glass. Their crystals shifted, forming patterns that seemed almost familiar, like faces in clouds or stars seen through atmosphere. For a moment, James could have sworn they looked sad. That's impossible, he whispered. What's impossible? Dr. Miller had entered the observation room quietly, still moving carefully with her injured leg. The fact that they have emotions, or that they're nothing like what we thought they were. James turned to face her. They killed my crew. I watched them tear through. Different faction, Miller interrupted. Different purpose. Singer and Shadow. They're researchers, like us. They'd been trying to prevent this war, but their own people. She trailed off, wincing as she put too much weight on her bad leg. Dr. Miller's vital signs suggest she should be resting, Ada noted. But her statement aligns with unusual data I've been collecting. Captain, look at this. A new hologram appeared, showing two neural pattern maps side by side. One was clearly human. James recognized the basic structure from his military training. The other, that's Singer's crystalline pattern, Ada explained. I've been scanning them continuously. The similarities are remarkable, almost as if their entire physical form functions like a human neural network, but vastly more complex. Through the glass, Singer had started humming again, the sound carrying even through the thick barrier. Shadow's crystals flickered in response, and for a second, James saw another pattern, like stars seen from Earth, like the view from his old ship's bridge just before. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall. Captain. Ada's voice showed genuine concern, something that would have surprised him if he could think clearly. Your neural patterns err. I've seen this before, James gasped. On the horizon, right before the attack. One of them tried to warn us. Made these same patterns, This same sound. But I didn't understand. I didn't. Singer pressed their crystalline form against the glass, directly opposite James. Their patterns shifted rapidly, desperately trying to convey something. Shadow's hum grew stronger, more urgent. "They're trying to tell us something," Miller said softly. "Something important enough to risk coming to a human station. Captain, what if everything we thought we knew about the Bright was wrong?" James looked at Singer, really looked at them. And for the first time, he let himself wonder if he'd been wrong too. "Play it again," James said, leaning forward in his chair. The hologram flickered in the dim light of Haven Station's research lab, showing Singer's crystalline patterns in slow motion. "This is the 47th replay, Captain," Eda noted. "Your stress levels." "Play it again." The AI complied silently. In the hologram, Singer's crystals shifted through complex patterns, each movement creating tiny musical vibrations. Dr. Miller sat nearby, typing rapidly on her tablet as she compared notes. "There," James pointed. "That pattern. It's exactly what I saw on the horizon before." He swallowed hard. "Before the attack." Ada adjusted the hologram, freezing the image. "The pattern does match archived footage from the horizon's final transmission. But there's something else." New data streams appeared alongside the original image. Singer's neural patterns show intense emotional responses during these communications, similar to human pain signals. "They're hurting." Miller looked up from her tablet. "While they communicate." "Not physical pain," Ada clarified. "The closest human equivalent would be grief." James stood abruptly, walking to the observation window. Beyond it, Singer and Shadow rested in their modified chamber. Their crystals pulsed softly in sync, like heartbeats. "Dr. Miller," Ada said suddenly, "your latest translation algorithm. May I access it?" Miller nodded, sending the data to the station's mainframe. For several moments, Ada was silent, processing. When she spoke again, her voice held something new, something almost like excitement. "Captain, Dr. Miller, I believe I've made a breakthrough. Singer's basic patterns align with standard Bright language. But there's a secondary layer. They're not just communicating, they're feeling. Every pattern carries emotional data." James turned from the window. "What are you saying?" "The Bright don't just communicate with their crystalline forms. They experience emotions through them. And Singer's faction, they've learned to understand human emotions. That's why they're different. That's why they're trying to stop the war." Through the window, Singer suddenly moved, their crystals brightening. They pressed against the barrier, forming patterns more complex than any they'd seen before. "Ada." James stepped closer to the window. "What are they saying?" The AI processed the patterns in real time, her systems working at full capacity. "It's a warning. The aggressive Bright, they're not just fighting us. They're harvesting us." "Harvesting what?" Miller asked, though her pale face suggested she already knew. "Emotions, human emotions, specifically." Ada paused. "Grief, pain, loss. The feelings that Captain Reed has been experiencing since the horizon. The feelings that drew them to his ship in the first place." James felt the floor sway beneath him. "They attacked us because we were mourning our dead. Because I had lost my crew in a previous battle." "Yes. And no." Ada's voice was gentle. "Singer's people, they learned to understand human emotions naturally, through study and communion. But the others, they found a way to crystallize human grief, to harvest it as energy. They're addicted to it. The more they take, the more they need." Shadows stirred in their chamber, their darker crystals reflecting James's troubled expression. Their patterns shifted weakly, and Ada translated in real time. They say the harvesters are coming. They can sense the grief here. Your grief, Captain, like a beacon." James pressed his hand against the cold glass. On the other side, Singer mirrored his gesture, their crystals forming patterns that even without translation spoke of sorrow, of understanding, of desperate hope. All this time, he whispered, I thought they were monsters, but they're just addicts. And Singer's people are the ones trying to save both species, Miller finished, from an addiction that could destroy us all. In the silence that followed, Ada monitored James's vital signs. For the first time in months, his heart rate was steady. The patterns of his neural activity were changing, shifting like Singer's crystals. He was beginning to understand. And understanding, Ada noted, was its own kind of pain. The alarm woke James from a fitful sleep. Red emergency lights pulsed through his quarters as Ada's voice came through the station speakers. Captain, multiple bright vessels detected. Large fleet, approaching from Vector 3 to 17. James was already moving, pulling on his uniform as he ran toward the command center. How many? 27 ships detected so far. Their crystal signatures matched the Harvester faction. The command center was chaos when James arrived. Officers rushed between stations, calling out readings and status reports. Through the main viewport, he could see them, crystal ships catching starlight, beautiful and deadly. Time to intercept, James demanded. 17 minutes at current speed. Baker reported from his station. Sir, they're not even trying to hide their approach. It's like they want us to see them coming. James finished. He turned to Ada's nearest sensor. Status of Singer and Shadow. A new hologram appeared, showing the medical bay. Both bright were pressed against the observation glass, their crystals pulsing with intense patterns. Their forms seemed to shimmer and twist, resonating with something distant. Their crystalline structures are changing, Ada reported. They appear to be responding to something. Captain, you need to see this. The hologram shifted, showing a complex wave pattern. This energy signature is emanating from both Singer and the approaching fleet. But Singer's pattern is different, almost like an antidote to a poison. Dr. Miller said, limping into the command center. Captain, Singer's been trying to tell us. Their people found a way to counter the Harvester's addiction. That's why they were fleeing. James watched the crystal ships grow larger in the viewport. Alert all personnel. Begin evacuation procedures. Sir. Baker looked up from his station. Haven Station is humanity's farthest outpost. If we lose it, if those ships get what they want, we'll lose more than a station. James straightened his uniform. Ada, how long to evacuate all non-essential personnel? 14 minutes with current protocols. But Captain, Ada paused, something she rarely did. Singer and Shadow's containment chamber can't be evacuated quickly. The life support systems are too specialized. James felt something cold settle in his stomach, the same feeling he'd had on the horizon, watching crystal ships appear from nowhere. But this time, he understood what he was seeing. Dr. Miller, he said quietly, you've been working with Singer. What are they trying to tell us now? Miller studied the frantic patterns of light coming from the medical bay feed. They're trying to protect us. The patterns, they're like what we saw before. But stronger, like they're trying to shield something. Or someone, Ada interrupted. Captain, your neural patterns. They're resonating with Singer's crystals at a quantum level. The Harvesters aren't just coming for the station. They're coming for you. James watched the approaching fleet, remembering every nightmare, every moment of grief he carried since losing his crew. The Harvesters had sensed it all, drawn to his pain like moths to a flame. How long can Singer maintain their current pattern, he asked. Unknown, Ada replied. But their energy readings are already showing signs of strain. Shadow is too weak to help. If they continue, she didn't need to finish. James could see the way Singer's crystals were dimming, fighting against something only they could sense. Begin the evacuation, he ordered. But I'm staying, and I'm going to talk to our guests. Captain, Baker protested. The risk is already here. James turned from the viewport, his decision made. Ada, monitor the fleet's approach. Miller, come with me. If Singer knows how to stop this, we've got about 16 minutes to figure it out. As they hurried toward the medical bay, James felt something he hadn't experienced since the horizon. Purpose. The harvesters were coming for his grief, for his pain. Well, let them come. This time, he understood what they were after. And this time, he wasn't alone. The medical bay doors hissed open as James ran in, Miller close behind him. Singer's crystals had changed color, glowing with an intense blue light that filled the room. Shadow lay nearby, their darker form pulsing weakly in time with Singer's patterns. "Ada," James called out. "What are they doing?" "Processing," the AI responded. "Singer's crystalline structure is vibrating at frequencies I've never recorded before. It's like they're trying to." "Captain, move back from the glass." The warning came too late. Singer's form flared with brilliant light, and suddenly James wasn't in the medical bay anymore. He was back on the horizon, watching crystal ships tear through space. But this time, something was different. He could feel what they felt. Hunger. Deep, endless hunger for the pain of others. "James." Miller's voice seemed far away. "Your vital signs are going crazy." He couldn't respond. The memory shifted, showing him the moment before the attack. The warning patterns he hadn't understood, the desperate attempt at communication. But now he saw it through Singer's eyes, felt their horror at what their corrupted kin were about to do. "Ada," he gasped, "are you seeing this?" Affirmative. Singer is somehow projecting their memories, converting them into forms your brain can process. But the energy drain is significant. They can't maintain this for long. Through the glass, shadows stirred, their crystals brightening slightly. New patterns formed, and Ada translated in real time. They say the harvesters weren't always like this. Their people discovered human grief by accident, tried to understand it, but some became addicted to the energy it produced. They learned to crystallize emotion itself. Another wave of memory hit James. He saw Singer's people trying to stop the harvesters, saw them fracture and fight among themselves, saw the moment they realized what the addiction was doing to both species. "The fleet is 8 minutes out," Ada reported. "Evacuation is at 67% completion." James pressed his hand against the glass. Singer mirrored him on the other side, their crystals dimming with effort. In that touch, he felt something he'd been running from for months. His own grief, pure and sharp as crystal. "They're not just coming for the station," he realized. "All this time, I've been broadcasting," Miller finished. "Your pain, your loss. Like a beacon in space." "Correct," Ada confirmed. "The harvesters are drawn to concentrated emotional energy." Captain Reed's unprocessed grief from the Horizon incident makes Haven Station a prime target. Shadow's patterns shifted again, more urgent now. "They say there's a way to stop them," Ada translated. "Singer's people found a solution, but it requires." "Captain, they're asking for your help. They say you have to let them in. Let them show you how to truly process your grief." James looked at his reflection in the glass, saw the haunted eyes that had stared back at him for months. Behind him, the emergency lights painted everything in shades of red. "What happens if I say yes?" "Unknown," Ada admitted. "This level of human-bright interaction has never been attempted. The energy transfer could be dangerous to both parties." 6 minutes to fleet intercept. Baker's voice came through the comm. "Sir, we need to leave." But James wasn't listening. He was watching Singer's crystals pulse, seeing how they matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Everything he'd lost, everything he'd carried. They understood it all, not to feed on it, but to help him heal. "Do it," he said. Singer's form flared again, brighter than before. Their crystals seemed to phase through the glass, reaching for him with patterns that sang of shared pain and possible healing. The last thing James heard before the light took him was Ada's voice, sounding almost human in its concern. "Captain, your neural patterns are synchronizing with Singer's. Whatever you're about to experience, don't let go." Light filled James's world. Not the harsh light of explosions or the cold light of distant stars, but something warm and alive. Singer's consciousness merged with his, and suddenly he was drowning in memory. He saw his crew again, not in their final moments, but in all the small moments before. Coffee shared on the bridge, jokes during maintenance checks, the quiet trust they'd placed in him, their captain. Their patterns are completely synchronized. Ada's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Singer is, they're teaching him how to crystallize grief itself. Through the merger, James felt Singer's gentle guidance. Don't run from the pain, they seemed to say. Don't hide from it. Transform it. The fleet. Miller's distant voice called out. They're within range. James opened eyes he hadn't realized he'd closed. The medical bay had filled with crystalline light, refracting off every surface. Shadow had risen, their darker form now glowing with renewed strength. 4 harvester ships have docked with the station, Ada reported. Their patterns. They're hungry. Captain, your emotional signature is drawing them directly to your location. But James wasn't afraid anymore. Through Singer's connection, he finally understood. Grief wasn't something to be taken or consumed. It was something to be honored, transformed, and released. Like turning carbon into diamond. Ada, he said, his voice steady. Remember how you've been learning about human emotions? Yes, Captain. Show them. The AI hesitated for just a moment. Then Haven Station's systems surged to life. Every screen, every hologram began displaying images. The crew's daily lives, their interactions, their moments of joy and sorrow. 3 years of Ada watching, learning, understanding what it meant to be human. The door burst open. Crystalline figures entered, harvesters, their forms sharp and hungry. But they stopped, transfixed by Ada's display. Now Singer, James whispered. Together, they released everything. James's grief for his lost crew transformed into gratitude for having known them. The weight of command became the strength of responsibility. Every painful memory crystallized not into energy to be consumed, but into something new, something healing. The light from their merged consciousness filled the room, then the deck, then the whole station. Through it, the harvesters saw what Singer had learned, that human emotions weren't fuel to be burned, but seeds to be grown. Their patterns, Ada announced, wonder in her artificial voice. The harvester ships, they're changing. Shadow moved forward, their crystals resonating with Singer's frequency. One by one, the harvesters' sharp edges began to soften. Their hungry patterns shifted towards something more like Singer's gentle geometry. The fleet is retreating. Baker's voice came through the comm. All but the docked ships. They're leaving. James felt Singer begin to withdraw from their connection, but he held on for one moment more. In that space between their minds, he saw what they had created together, a bridge between species, built from transformed pain. When the light finally faded, James found himself kneeling on the medical bay floor. Singer's crystals had taken on a new pattern, more complex and beautiful than before. Shadow stood beside them, their once dark form now shot through with colors like dawn breaking through clouds. Ada, James said softly, status report. The harvester ships have all retreated beyond sensor range, the AI reported. The individuals on the station appear to have been cured. Their crystalline patterns now match Singer's frequency. A pause. And Captain, your neural patterns have changed too. The grief is still there, but it's different. James stood slowly, looking at his reflection in the observation glass. The haunted look in his eyes had changed to something calmer, stronger. Not different, he corrected, transformed, like carbon into diamond. He turned to Singer, who glowed with quiet pride. Thank you for not letting go, for showing me why it had to break me, so I could rebuild myself better. Singer's crystals chimed in response, a sound like hope made audible. And somewhere in Haven Station's systems, Ada recorded a new emotion she was learning, the feeling of watching something broken become whole again.